In this video, I speedran for all 16 colored dyes, which at first sounds pretty crazy and also slightly weird, but honestly, it was a great challenge. At first, you'd think that going around picking flowers is pretty easy, right? But what about green dye, or black dye, or even brown dye? Some of the colors in this speedrun would be pretty tricky to get my hands on, and it isn't really as easy as just spawning in a flower forest and just picking some flowers. Will I be able to complete this challenge? Stay tuned to find out. But before we do continue, I'd like to quickly say that if you do enjoy this style of content and you would like to see more, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so that way you will never miss another upload. I also stream these speedruns live over on my Twitch, so if you would like to experience the entire thing live, the links are down in the description below. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video. Spawning in a fresh new speedrun world, as you can see, we spawned in a desert biome. Now it seems like in every speedrun I do, the desert biomes are just super critical to being able to do everything efficiently, but trust me, this run is going to be a lot different to my previous runs, even though I did spawn in another desert. Now, the thing about this seed, which I was really lucky to get, and quite frankly, I don't know how I pulled this in about 5 resets, was the fact that this desert was pretty short-lived in the sense that the biomes around it were arguably more important than the desert itself. Now, as I was going for a dye speedrun and had to get every single color in the game, I went ahead and grabbed 3 cacti right off the bat here, as you would expect. But then I started running off into the distance away from the desert biome, which isn't normal in lots of speedruns. Now, the reason for that, if you couldn't already tell, is the fact that we had a jungle biome literally right next to this desert, not even 100 blocks away. And this is exactly what made this speedrun entirely possible. The fact that I could get a jungle biome right next to a desert meant that I could not only get the cactus green dye, which would be used for the lime green dye and also for the cyan dye, but I also had the brown dye from the cocoa beans, which you can only realistically obtain from a jungle biome unless you get some insane RNG with a wandering trader who happens to have the cocoa bean trade, and if you can even find the wandering trader at all. So with this seed in the bag, I knew that I had to make this happen, and this speedrun was going to be really easy as long as I played my cards correctly. So after arriving in the jungle, I went ahead and grabbed some cocoa beans, I crafted the brown dye immediately, and then started punching some trees to get myself some wood. As you would in every speedrun, I made myself a crafting table, crafted a wooden pickaxe, I dug down, broke a little bit of cobblestone, made a stone pickaxe, and then I went ahead and also grabbed some more cobblestone to make a stone sword and a stone axe. I kept some leftover cobblestone for some later tools that I would need later down the line, and after building back up to the surface, I set off to grab some more materials. Because I was in a jungle biome now, I realized that we actually had a lot of melons just scattered around the place, so I went ahead and I grabbed some melons to get myself some easy food, and while I was at it, I also cut down the rest of this tree to get myself some extra wood that I would need in the run. Now the next step here was to look for some more cobblestone or just some more resources to actually get started with the rest of the speedrun, as I was going to need some furnaces in order to cook the cactus green dye that I needed, and also just some food and some other things. So after finding this pretty big ditch just in the floor with some exposed stone, I went ahead, I mined a couple cobblestone, I swam out, and then set off foot to look for some ink sacs. The other brilliant thing about this seed was the fact that I not only spawned in a desert biome that was pretty much right next to a jungle, but I also spawned in a desert biome next to a jungle, next to a huge coral reef and just ocean area in general. And this made finding squids super easy, so I figured I would trek near the shoreline, and that way if I found any squids, I would go out and get some ink sacs. Along the way, I ended up crafting myself a composter and also a stone shovel because I figured I might need that for some extra utility. But the composter here was the more important craft of this run. Now, a composter is something that you probably wouldn't craft in any speedrun ever, and quite frankly, unless you're playing a vanilla world and you wanted to trade with villagers and you deliberately want to get farmers, you probably won't be crafting composters ever. So why was I going to need a composter? Well, you see, obviously because I was going to get every single colored dye in the game, I was going to need lots of different colors. Now, I already had the green dye, the brown dye, and the black dye secured just because of the spawn that I got, but the only other ways to get white dye would either be to kill skeletons for bones, or I could use a composter, and a composter is a much easier way to get bone meal because I didn't have to wait for it to be nighttime, I didn't have to go into any caves, and I wouldn't need any combat. all I needed was just organic materials and just compost them for some easy bone meal. The other brilliant thing about this run was the fact that I also spawned near a jungle, and because the jungle has so many melons, the melons would make for some really good compost, and as long as I could find some other food or just enough melons to feed me, I would have more than enough materials to make as much bone meal as possible, and I could use all that bone meal to craft a lot of the colors, and I mean a lot of the colors in today's speedrun. So now that you guys are kept up to speed with what's going on in this speedrun, I kept on running around and found myself near some cows, so I killed them for some food. Because while melons are a food source, I was definitely going to want to use them for compost, and they aren't even a good food source anyways, so if I could get some beef instead and use that for my food, I wouldn't have to worry about that at all in the entirety of this speedrun. Now the next step of this speedrun was to look for a forest biome, or just your average normal oakland area that's going to give you just the normal grass type that you would find. As much as a jungle biome was necessary for the brown dye, and the desert was necessary for the green dye, I also needed just an open space to get red dye, or yellow dye, or even white dye or light grey dye that you would get from all the other flowers. And luckily for me, I did find a forest biome just across the river here, so I crafted myself a boat, swam across, and arrived on the other side. Now once I had arrived here, the first thing that I did was of course look for some flowers so I could just pick really easily, because I didn't really want to have to bone meal the floor if I didn't need to, because of course I was going to need that bone meal to craft the white dye for the rest of the dye. So instead, I kind of just set up shop and put my composter down and started composting a bunch of stuff, and I managed to get myself some easy bone meal, which left us needing only 6 more bone meal for the rest of this run. I also grabbed a little bit more cobblestone and crafted myself 2 furnaces, placed everything down, and started to cook a lot of different stuff. First thing I did was to make some fuel, as I needed some decent fuel to actually start cooking food and other materials. And while that was doing its thing, I ran around into the water and I tried to get some ink sac. There was a squid near the land here, so I just killed that really easily and got myself my first ink sac. And then I went out into the water because I found another squid way off into the distance and started to swim towards it. Although when I started swimming towards it, this ended up happening. You guys are talking about? I think you can't even do it when you're not level 95. Where'd the squid go? What? Wait, how did this stuff all just despawn? The fish just disappeared. No, the fish is there. Bro, squid just dipped, dude. The squid just disappeared. I don't really know what happened there, and it was very confusing, so I just went back towards the surface and found myself near some other squids that were actually closer to the land. I went ahead and killed those to get myself the next ink sac that I was needing, and then I swam back to the workspace that I had set up on the surface. And now comes the fun bit. I had a whole bunch of random materials in my inventory, I had stuff smelting, I had things to take care of, so did a whole bunch of micromanaging here, just sorting my inventory and throwing things out. And after I did all that, I had made all the cactus green dye that I needed, I had my second white dye in my possession, and I also went ahead and crafted my lime green dye because I was going to need that for this run. I also left some food cooking in the furnaces because I was going to need that to survive in this speed run. And while that was going, I ran around and looked for some flowers and managed to find myself some poppies just on this nearby hill. I grabbed all 5 poppies that I had found and the dandelion that I also saw in this area, but I was going to need a second dandelion and I was going to need a 6th poppy. So as you'd expect, I kept on running around looking for any more flowers that I could get my hands on, and in the meantime I was also punching some loose grass because if I could get some extra seeds, I'd be able to use those seeds for compost as well as the melons that I had before. It wasn't long until I found some rose bushes which were really good and they give you more red dye than the poppies actually do, so after punching some of those and then crafting all the red dye I needed, I threw out all the remaining stuff that wasn't necessary for this speedrun. I had 6 red dye in my possession now, which was all the red dye that I would need for the rest of the crafts in this run, and now I was just looking for the yellow dye and also some blue dye, which was going to be a little bit different than just running around on the surface picking flowers. I will get to the blue dye a little bit later in this speedrun, but in the meantime, I ran back to my workspace and then made some more bone meal, and once again just sort of kept running around, collecting some more seeds, and I was just looking for materials that I could use for compost. Now the area that I had sort of set up shop didn't have that many seeds, so I swam across the river, back over towards the jungle area, because I figured that the melons would be a lot more efficient and also a lot easier to harvest. But it wasn't until I had landed on the other side of the river that I had realized that I completely missed all of the loose grass that was already here, so I went ahead and just sort of mowed the lawn for a little bit, and I collected some of the melons on the other side, and got myself a pretty substantial amount of just these organic materials that I could use to compost back at my workspace. When I tried to go back to my little area to start composting things again, I was greeted by a spider and also a skeleton, and managed to kill them both relatively easily. The skeleton also dropped a bone which secured the rest of the white dye that we were going to need in this speedrun, and it also saved me a lot of time and effort of having to compost things, because having 3 bone meal per bone drop is definitely better than just composting materials. But after sorting that out, my time in this area was finished. I had 6 red dye in my possession, I had all the white dye that I was going to need, I also had the green dye, the brown dye, and the lime dye. So realistically, the only thing that I had remaining was 1 more yellow dye and some blue dye, which I was going to get from caving. Now, if you guys aren't aware already, the only ways you can obtain blue dye, at least in the more reasonable ways in this game, are either from the cornflower, which is a type of flower that spawns in certain areas, the blue orchid, which is also another blue flower, which also spawns in specific areas, or you could use lapis, and lapis is kind of the safe option because you don't have to be in a specific biome or location for it. All you need is a decent looking cave, and you're pretty much bound to find some as long as you just run around caving for a bit. This was going to be the strategy for me because it was a much more appealing option if I knew that I could guarantee blue dye just from going around caving, and rather than having to run around on the surface and try to find a swamp biome or a flower field of any sort, I knew I'd have a much easier time caving, so that was the plan for the rest of this speedrun. Along the way, I ended up finding some lilacs, which wasn't really in my plan, but I managed to grab those to get some extra magenta dye, and I also took some detours to kill some sheep because it was nighttime and I wanted to sleep the night so I wouldn't have to deal with any of these mobs. I managed to get enough wool pretty quickly and swim across a little river before crafting myself a bed and then sleeping in the open to skip the night. And now that it was daytime, the search for a cave continued. I found an oxide daisy along the way, which once again wasn't really in my plans, but having an extra light grey dye is pretty cool. It would save me some extra milliseconds from having to craft it later on, and this is a speedrun after all, we were trying to be as efficient as possible. I also chose to organize my inventory and really just sort out the rest of the dyes that I could craft just in this open field, because it was going to be a lot easier for me to tell what I was missing and what I wasn't missing if I just sorted everything out. So I crafted an orange dye and crafted some more things, and then I set off again to look for another cave. Now I was going to run to the end of this little island here and then just turn back if I couldn't find a cave system to get some lapis, but something a lot better ended up happening, and it ended up completely saving this entire run. Anything this way? No? Oh, blue. Oh my god. Oh my god, we don't even need lapis. We don't even need lapis, bro. We don't even need lapis. Oh, it's done. It's done. It's done. It's done. Oh my god. Okay. So that is all the blues. I already have the light gray, but I'll make it anyways. Need to make pink, and I just need to make purple. And then that's it. That's it. That's it. That's legit it. That's it. That's it. 16 minutes. 16 minutes. Look. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 40, 16. 16 dyes. All of them. Red, orange, yellow, both greens, all the blues, brown, all the different whites and blacks, and then all the pinks. That's it. That's it. That's all of them. That's all of them. This seed was actually legendary as well, bro. Hey, mate, we gotta do justice. We gotta do this world justice. Hold on. I'm just gonna make a chest. That's amazing. Orange, yellow, put the greens. We'll do the blues as well. Yup. We'll do all the pinks next. Brown, and then dark gray. Oh, no. White, light gray, dark gray, black. There we go. That's all the dyes. That was so easy. Oh my god, I'm actually happy about that. I'm actually happy about that. See, I told, who did I say? I said to someone, or was it just now on stream? I said 2 cycles, 2 day cycles, and I can do it. That wasn't even 1, bro. That wasn't even 1. I slept the night and everything. Oh my god, GG's, boys. We did it. We did it. And with that being said, this speedrun was officially complete. At first, I really didn't think it would be possible, because getting a perfect seed like the one that I got in this video is pretty rare. But I did it, and I'm really happy that I did. However, if you did make it this far into the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel, because these speedruns will only get more and more creative, and I promise that it'll be absolutely worth it. Also, just a friendly reminder that this speedrun was streamed live over on my Twitch, so if that does interest you, the links are down in the description below. But with all that being said, that is going to wrap up everything that I did have for today's video, and as always, take care and peace. Melon's probably going to be our best food source, even though it's not very, what is it, not very nutritional.